Can everybody hear me? I tend to be pretty dang loud anyway, so I have to always quiet down when I talk. My wife says, "You do have no idea how loud you are." So anyway, I thank everybody for coming. Appreciate your attendance here. We're going to talk a little bit about interactions between vaccines, immune system, how the immune system interacts with the reproductive system, and and just kind of maybe get some different thoughts, get people trying to think in a little bit different way. So one of the things is everybody's kind of familiar with this saying, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And when I was looking for the giving credit to this common term that we have, it became obvious that nobody really knew who said it first because there's multiple sources. But I did run across another version of it that I think really sets the stage for progressive cattlemen, for veterinarians, anybody that's that wants to be at the top of their game, top of their group. And we'll just read that. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. Just because we always have doesn't mean we always have to. And once I know better, I should choose better, right? Now, I don't agree with anything else that Miss Kudrow says because she's kind of a vegan, not wanting to promote beef. But this one statement of hers is actually pretty profound, I think. And I think if we live our lives, our careers, asking what if and why not, and to this point, we continually get better, and we can be better both in production. This is another, at Elanco, we kind of have a philosophy that we call lifetime immunity. Basically, lifetime immunity doesn't mean one and done. It means how we progress things. When I lay a foundation in a calf, I have to be thinking about that animal 4, 5, 10 years from now and how all of these things relate to each other, okay? And so this lifetime immunity to promote is health and productivity. And it goes back to using the right product in the right animal at the right time, okay? So we'll just kind of take a look a little bit at a production cycle and kind of walk through some of the interactions here, and then we'll get into more of the vaccine. But this kind of lays a little bit of groundwork. So we've got this nice calf there on the ground, got a nice calving area where it's not, first thing out of the cow isn't getting a mouthful of slop. What's the most important thing that can happen for this calf in its entire life that will dictate its performance its entire life? Nobody have an idea? Colostrum, right? If it doesn't get colostrum, it will not perform to its genetic potential or quality colostrum for the rest of its life. It's very important. And it's a lot more than antibodies. There's all kinds of cytokines in there, the chemicals that tell the immune system, transfer information from the cow to the calf. And the more we start to learn about the immune system, the less we know, really. But these things are so interconnected. So what's the other thing that's happened? This calf needs to get up off the ground and drink colostrum and prepare its immune system to start responding to things that it never saw before because mama's been taking care of it. What else is happening right there? We're building a bond with that calf, going to pair bond that calf. But even probably more important than that, not as important as colostrum, she's transferring her microbiome into that calf. She's licking that calf's face. That calf is going to get the bacteria that are in her mouth, and they're going to colonize the GI tract. And we start to learn, as we learn about microbiome, GI bugs, and how they communicate with the immune system. And if they get out of sort, it changes how the immune system responds. There's a connection between what's happening in the GI tract at the feedlot and bovine respiratory disease. So these things become really important to understand. So if I lay a good foundation and I have a healthy cow, so that cow needs to make colostrum. What does she need to do that? She needs a good immune system, right? So I need to have fed her correctly at least 3 months ago before this calf was ever born, because that's going to affect her colostrum. And it's going to affect how she responds to vaccines when we vaccinate her, which is going to eventually affect this calf. You guys heard of fetal programming? Where what happens to the cow and the calf when it's inside the cow while it's in a fetus? We can change the performance, not only reproductive performance, but we can also change the feedlot performance of that animal by not taking care of that cow. So we're turning off and on genes with exposure to environment. So we have to start thinking in a completely different way. As we understand the immune system more, we need to think in a different way. So one, we got to get this calf ready. The first 45 days of its life is probably probably the most critical. It has to get exposed. It's got to down-regulate some of its immune system, up-regulate some of it to become that calf at the bottom there. And that calf is either going to become a replacement heifer or a bull, or end up in the feedlot, right? And so the risk that it has in the first picture to the second picture to the third picture, every one of those is a different risk. And they're facing different environmental stresses. And so if we lay a good foundation, that calf is able to deal with those things as we move along. That cow's got to be ready to go back up and get rebred. That is going to be dictated by what we fed her 60, 90 days ago as well, because if she's not in good enough body conditions, she's not going to get bred when she should. And then she needs to go out here and be a gestating cow. And again, the risk to that fetus is completely different in that gestating cow than it is once it's on the ground. So just kind of thinking all these interconnections, how the immune system and how the reproductive system talk, right? They have to communicate. Otherwise, females would never get pregnant. It's a foreign body inside that female, and we have to talk back and forth and know what to react to and what not to. So what we want to do is we're going to walk down a little history and show you kind of a progression of events that happened over the last, at least 40, maybe 50 years, and kind of walk through some of these events that have led us to what we know today. So back in the 80s, when we started synchronizing heifers, one of the things that we noticed was that there would be these anecdotal reports of some heifers not getting bred when they should have been, what we thought they should have been, and other places it seemed okay, their conception rate was correct. So as some experiments started coming along trying to figure out what was going on with some of these that had reproductive failure. And one of them is this study by Miller that looked at, gave cattle IBR virus, and then harvested ovaries and looked at them, harvested these ovaries at 7 to 20, or they gave the virus at 7 days to 28 days, different time frame. And then they looked at the corpus luteum. So the follicle ovulates, and then that ovulated follicle becomes the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum creates the progesterone that keeps the cows pregnant, right? So they noticed that those CLs didn't look normal. They also saw that there was an infiltration of a lot of immune cells, macrophages, lymphocytes. So there was something stimulating over it. So they looked for the virus. In this particular study, they found proteins from the virus, not live virus, but they did find some proteins. So as we move along, another experiment came along and said, well, could that happen with vaccine virus? So could our vaccines be causing some of this issue? So they looked at a similar way, give the vaccine prior to ovulation, and then look at the ovaries after they ovulated, see what that CL is normally developing. And again, the CL had some damage, had some maybe extra hemorrhage, and had some tissue that didn't look like it was very viable compared to the controls that didn't have vaccinations. And then again, you notice this infiltration of some immune cells. So the immune cells are in there doing something. Go to 1998, Dr. Grooms did this study where they looked at kind of a repeat of the same thing, but they used a combination, a commercial vaccine that had BVD and IBR in it. And basically kind of looked at and found a very similar results in that these 10 days after these cattle ovulated, there was macrophages and lymphocytes in the ovaries, and they could pick up the BVD proteins, not necessarily a live virus, but the proteins. So that tells you that it was there, right? It was there. So now we move forward, and we're looking at 2013. And we just happen to have today the author of this paper, Dr. Perry, over in the corner. Dr. Perry was at South Dakota State University, and he's now at Texas A&M. But he started down this path trying to find out what's going on as well, because a lot of people are asking the question, hey, can I vaccinate when I'm preparing my cattle, doing a synchronization program? Is there a negative effect? Can we do that? Well, the historical information would say, yeah, we probably shouldn't, but with enough effort, let's prove it, right? Let's see what's going on. So Dr. Perry set up this study looking at naive heifers, never been vaccinated, getting a modified live or getting it killed, and then a third group that just got saline. Okay, and so they were crowded close to ovulation, just like some of those other previous studies to see if we could see something directly related. And this is the way that this study was set up. So it's a normal Cedar CoSync a synchronization program. They're vaccinated. There's 4 groups. There's 2 killed vaccinating groups at 36 and 8 days pre AI. Then you have a single dose about a week before you're going to AI them. Timing these with some of the handling procedures we're already doing. Then a modified live at that 8-day, and then placebo, so saline, similar 2 times similar to the modified live, or to the killed. Sorry. So then also as part of this study, he wanted to look at hormone levels. Are there differences when we're seeing these changes to these CLs? Is there progesterone differences? Is there estrogen differences? And just see how that plays out. Now these cattle were AI'd, and here's the results of that. The 2-dose group, the 1-dose group, and the placebo group are not different from each other, but all of them, except for the single dose, is different from the modified live. And I don't know if you noticed, but the single dose only had 7 cattle in it. And my guess, and that's the second line there of 0.08. We use 0.05 to say, hey, this is statistically different. But I would bet if we had 21 or 22 cattle in the group, just like the other ones, we might see a statistical difference there. So the modified live was definitely doing something in this situation to decrease conception rates. So fast forward again, another Dr. Perry study. So we have to give him lots of credit because he got onto the idea of where's this going, and I'm going to find out why. Some people just do their research, and that's all we see. Dr. Perry has taken this and says, I'm going to find out why all this is happening, right? So we start out with these naive heifers again. This is a 2013 study. We actually wanted to see, what was I going to say here? So we wanted to look at again, kind of this is the highlights of the study. So we did see a decrease in the AI rates. 38% of them had abnormal cycles. So that's very important, right? When we use the modified live in that group, they had an abnormal cycle and changed the progesterone levels compared to the norms. So that kind of gave him an idea of maybe where we're going with this thing. There is a difference. So we're not just seeing incidental damage. There is some differences between these modified lives and how they affect the ovary. So 2015, Dr. Walls, he did another experiment where he was doing different time frames vaccinating, again with modified live and inactivated at different time frames. But at each of those, even all the way out to 61 days pre-breeding, there was a difference in the conception rates between the modified lives and the killed, up to 20% of these animals. And while this study was a small study and was not statistically significant, it certainly fits with the rest of the historical research that we had up to this point. So we want to try and see, we can do these little experiments in small numbers of cattle. Does this reduction in conception rate that we see with pre-breeding modified live vaccines, does that transpose into the real world, into cattle out on the ranch, commercial cattle? So Dr. Perry designed a study in South Dakota where he took, there's 9 commercial herds. These are running age cattle. So there's heifers, there's all the way up to 10, 12 years old, just running age cattle. They all had to be well vaccinated with a modified live. So at least 2 doses as calves, and then annual boosters as we go along, and made sure that they were well vaccinated modified live groups. Going to divide these herds into 3 groups. We're going to have modified live, we're going to have an inactivated group, and we're going to have a control group. So we got something to compare to. And that's another important thing. If you're reading studies or looking at data, we got to have something to compare to. So we want those controls so we know what normal is, right? Lost a few of them along the way, but we ended up with about 1,300 animals. This is a typical, again, using the Cedar CoSync. He chose Bovishield that's been used in several of those. That's the number one selling modified live. And he used that as because that was representative of a lot of cattle out in the district, out in the U.S. And then on the killed side, used Virus Shield. That is the number one selling killed product across the country. And then we have the control. So you can see there, just everything is on label. The Bovishield was given 30 days ahead. That's what it says, at least 30 days ahead. Virus Shield, because those cattle have never seen a killed product, the label says they need 2 doses. So 2 doses, 30 days apart, with the last dose 30 days ahead of breeding. So this is just another little look at the timeline. But then what we do is we AI those animals. 28 days after AI, ultrasound them. So now we can tell who is pregnant, who got pregnant to the AI, correct? 28 days later, so these cattle go out to the bull after they've been AI'd 5 days later, 7 days later. And now if we look at 56 days, now I can see who in the 28 day or who in the AI group still has their fetus, who got pregnant the second time in the next cycle. And then we come back after the bulls came out. Most of these herds were either 60-day or 75-day breeding seasons. I think most of them were 60 days, if I remember right. So 30 days after the bulls came out, you ultrasound them again, and now I can double check all of these along the way, right? Did some of that conceived at the beginning? Are they still pregnant? And then who got pregnant the last cycle with the bull? So here's the results of that. This is the AI conception rate. And you'll notice that the killed vaccine is 46% or 46.5% pregnant. The modified live was only 40%, and the control group is 43%. The killed and the control are not statistically different, but they are statistically different from the modified live. So there's definitely something going on here. 6.5% difference. If I'm a purebred person and I'm raising purebred bulls and purebred heifers, what does that amount to? If I get 6 more calves, 3 more bulls at 8,000 apiece, 3 more heifers at what, 3,000 apiece? You get to 40,000 really quick in a deal like this, right? So it's important. These numbers are important. Here's the 56th day. So while there's another group of cattle that got pregnant as we go along the way, we still have the killed vaccine at 93. It's not different than the control group, the saline group, but it is different than the modified live group. And don't get shook up on what modified live, because it doesn't matter which one. Ours is the same way. It'll do the same thing. Dr. Perry's checked them all, and they all do the same thing. So this is the 56th day. Here's the entire breeding season. And again, more cattle caught up, but even at the end of the entire breeding season, we still have 3%, a 3% advantage for the killed vaccine. Okay? So this effect that's happening on the ovary or whatever was happening is long-term, affects them more than just one heat. There's more, every time they cycle, it's diminished, but it still is affecting them clear out here. So this is just the same data, just to put it as a progression, and so you can see everybody kind of keeps moving, and the ones in the modified lives are gradually catching up, but they didn't catch it by the end. So these are kind of the take-homes that we talk about. 6.5% increase on first service conception, 4.3% at 56 days, 2.5 or 2.8% for the entire breeding season. And by having more of those animals pregnant in the beginning, it's not only do I have more animals to sell, but I also have them a little bit older. They've gained a little bit more weight, so now I've got more pounds come fall, right? So it's really important. The one downside to that commercial setting and doing all these commercial cattle on a breeding program is we still don't know why. We confirmed that whatever we were seeing in these smaller studies, these more controlled laboratory type settings, transferred to the commercial operation, but we still need to answer why, right? So one of the things that we looked at is we wanted to look at, is there remnants of the virus? So could the virus itself from the vaccine still be involved in somehow reducing conception rates? So we had these cows We used virus shields, so a killed product. We used titanium, which is our modified live, and we also used the competitor's modified live. And this has been done with several of these modified lives. And then look at the next wave follicle. So aspirate the fluid out of the follicle and look for the virus. Is the virus still in that ovary? We did uterine biopsies, and we also did uterine fluid. Couldn't find any virus anywhere. So it's not a virus thing replicating on the ovary that's causing this downturn in conception rates. So now we get to the spot where he says, well, we got to find out why, right? We got to figure this thing out. So Dr. Perry designed another study. And you remember back when we looked at that one group of heifers where he vaccinated about 8 days before that he bred them? Well, by doing that, he increased the number of affected animals. But there was a certain number of those animals that had abnormal cycles. They short cycled, and they had abnormal progesterone levels when they sampled them. So because reproductive studies a lot of times take a lot of animals, thousands of animals, to find very small differences. So trying to find a way to decrease the number that we have to use and increase the number that maybe will be affected. He's designed this study to decrease the number of animals that we have to use, but maximize the likelihood of finding out a why. Is that a fair assumption? So we have modified live groups, and we have a killed group, and then we have some untreated controls. And so what he did here is we start back out, again, using the typical cedar co-sync. We're going to vaccinate them the day that they're in heat, okay? So that we can maximize the interaction of the vaccine or whatever's happening with the heat cycle, okay? And then I'm going to ultrasound them on day 3 and see that they're starting to form a CL like they're supposed to. On day 10 to 13, we're going to he harvested ovaries, the ovary that had the CL on it, from all of the groups. There was representatives of the control group, the modified live, and the kill group. They go in there and harvest those and look at them under the microscope. Is there something different about the CL? Through the entire 24 days of the study, every other day, they bled those cows and looked at hormones and other items that we wanted to know about. So 100% of the cows in the kill group had a normal cycle. They ovulated, they built a CL, started to build a CL by day 3. It went on and stayed there, and they had a normal cycle after that event. But only 76% of the modified lives had a normal cycle. Some of those animals had a short cycle, so they'd get out there to 3, 4, 5 days, and they'd reset, and they'd ovulate again and bring up a new CL. The CL that they had went away, okay? So, and 3% of those animals had abnormal circulating progesterone levels, okay? So they never really got to where we wanted them. They were either delayed, the peak came way too late. So a cow knows she's pregnant on about day 15, day 16. The fetus sends a signal to the cow and says, don't have another heat, I'm here, take care of me, right? That fetus about day 15, day 16. So when that happens, progesterone needs to be there, because progesterone is the hormone of pregnancy. It keeps the cow pregnant, keeps her from cycling, and protects that fetus, okay? So some of these cattle didn't have normal progesterone levels. So one of the things, looking at the microscope, and I'm going to show you pictures here in a little bit, but looking at the microscope, when a follicle ovulates, there are immune cells that come in, macrophages, and they produce chemicals. So cells communicate chemically. They don't talk, but they communicate with chemicals. And these macrophages come in and they help convert that follicle from a follicle into a CL, making the progesterone, okay? So they help in that with some of the chemicals that are there. So it's very important to have the right number of these luteal cells. These large luteal cells make about 80% of the progesterone that is being produced by the cow's ovary. And so it's very important to have them. And so we can look at that and we can see, well, here's where the controls are. They had a normal cycle and that's where they're at. The virus shield group is not statistically different from the saline group. And remember, they had 100% of them had a normal cycle. And then we see the modified live group, what's called an old CL and a new CL. The old CL would be the one that ovulated on the day that they were treated. The new CL would be the ones that tripped, that had a short cycle, and they made a new CL. And so, but you can see that the effect is still there. Even though they recycled and made a new CL, it's still abnormal. It doesn't have enough cells in it, okay? So this is what it looks like under the microscope. These are the 4 different groups. You got the upper left is the control. You got the virus shield on the upper right. And you got the modified live in the bottom on the left, and the modified live with the new cell on the left, or right, I'm sorry. So just looking at this level, I hope you can appreciate how different each one of those are, right? There is a lot of these cells that the arrows, and I'm going to zoom in here. Hopefully it'll work. There's the control one. And where those arrows are going to, you see they're kind of this large, right there, that's a large luteal cell. That big red blob is a large luteal cell right here. So those arrows point to all those large luteal cells. And those are the ones that are making progesterone. Remember that, okay? So now if we put the modified live, the old CL, they look completely different, right? We don't have to be a pathologist to look at that and go, hey, there's something not right here. Those arrows are pointing to the large luteal cells from that old CL, and they're not normal. They're dying or dead. Those nuclei are shrunk up. There's some extra fluid around those nuclei we call vaccination that's not supposed to be there. And the other thing you notice that there's not some of these little black ones out here. Some of these little guys out in here. Those are some of those immune cells. There's not as many of those in that modified live group. So what's going on here, right? So now we're going to look at, this is the new CL for the modified live group. So there's more cellularity there. There's the beginning of more large luteal cells, but you see all the little holes in them? Those are vacuoles. Those cells are not normal. They're not functioning correctly, and some of them may be dying. The nuclei are all shrunk up, what we call pycnotic nuclei. So even the new CL is abnormal. This is the killed group, the virus shield group. And you see the circles are surrounding the immune cells. There's a lot more immune cells in there than there are on the other vaccine. The arrows point to the large luteal cells that are producing progesterone. And once you see those, you can kind of compare the control to the virus shield, and you see that the numbers of those large luteal cells on that slide are very, very similar, right? There is a big difference in this number of macrophages. So, just another look at the old CL compared to the virus shield. So now we can see not only the controls, but you see the extreme difference between the modified live and the killed on what those cells look like. So statistically different, there's no difference between the controls and the virus shield group, but there is a difference between the modified lives and the controls and the virus shield group as far as the large luteal cells. So remember on the timeline, he was taking every other day blood samples, looking at. So this is the progesterone curves for all those cattle. So remember, we're taking those samples every other day, and we're measuring the progesterone, which is the pregnancy hormone. You have to have it in order to stay pregnant. And you see how they start to come apart there on day 6, right? So the modified or the kill group continues to get bigger and stronger and make a nice CL and make more and more progesterone, and the modified live group never catches up. It's always a little bit behind. And if I remember right, there's some of these cattle that never even get to 1 nanogram, correct? So there's some of these, so 1 nanogram is impossible to be pregnant at 1 nanogram. And some of them never even got that far up. So this is all of them grouped together. This is progesterone levels more in a bar graph than a graph where you average them all together. And those that had the normal cycle, only normal cycles, comparing the modified live and the killed group, you can see that the killed just has a lot more progesterone And then the second column is if you put all the animals, including those that had an abnormal cycle. And those that had an abnormal cycle, of course, drop it down because their progesterone dropped it the wrong day, right? So, more luteal cells, very important. We get more progesterone. We get a higher conception rate. We get a higher pregnancy rate. And we'll end up with more calves, right? Make some sense? So this is a little bit of the financial stuff. You can take and plug your numbers in right now because it's a heck of a lot different than what we have right here. But at the time of the publication, this is some of the data that was generated. So you take those 3 calves, just like we talked about before, even commercial calves, 3 calves, that's $4,500 just by shipping, just by changing vaccine, right? So does that mean that modified lives are bad? No. We need them both. So we used to have these 2 camps, and gray-haired people like me, we got out of school and you were either a modified live guy or you were a kill guy, and you never talked to each other because they're wrong. The other side's wrong, right? But then as they get older and maybe hopefully a little bit wiser, and we have people like Dr. Perry and we have people like Dr. Chase and doing some of this really good research, no, we need both. There's a right time and a right place and the right animal to use both of these vaccines. We need that modified live in those young animals in order to stimulate a broad immune response, to stimulate the memory that's going to last them the rest of their lives by doing a good job with modified lives. And then we take those females that now are going to be reproductive animals and we switch them to the killed products so that we can make sure that we maximize their reproductive health, their reproductive performance, and we'll end up with a bigger dollar value. Okay, so where are we at? 10. So my favorite. This is Dr. Wayne, veterinarian, talking about my favorite. Everybody's protocol should be slightly different because you handle them at a different time. You have different risks, but here's my favorite. I like to see 3 doses of modified lives into a calf before it ever gets bred. So I'm going to do 1 at branding time, 1 pre-breeding, or 1 pre-weaning or weaning. And then about 30, 45, certainly by 60 days after weaning, I'm going to get 1 more of them into them, and I'm going to concentrate on the viruses that cause reproductive loss. So I don't care about the rest of the 5. I want IBR and 2 strains, at least 2 strains of BVD in them at that 3rd dose. And it's not that they necessarily require a 3rd dose, but anytime I walk into a group of cattle, I expect about 5% of them not to respond to my vaccine. Maybe they're having a bad day. They're dealing with foot rot. Their immune system's tied up doing other things. Maybe they're the ones that don't eat the mineral. Maybe there's a lot of reasons why an individual won't respond to a vaccine. But I want that 3rd one in there because now I'm thinking about those heifers being cows. They're not heifers anymore. They're going to be my cows. So I need to lay that foundation, right? Then I go to when I'm going to breed heifers. This is my day, May 1. That's when I breed heifers. I'm going to back up 60 to 90 days, and they're going to get the first dose of the killed. 30 to 45 days later, they get the second dose of the killed. Now they're cows. Now when we preg check in the fall, everybody just gets a dose of killed at branding. At preg check time. I don't have to keep track of heifers and cows and not give this animal 1 vaccine and that animal the other vaccine. They're the same. And now we get into that habit. We vaccinate in the fall ahead of the risk. When do we want a vaccine? We want it right ahead. We want maximum protection against the risk. Most of our abortions come in the 3rd trimester. So if I can do a 2nd trimester vaccine towards the end and vaccinate them there, I'm helping to protect them from from an abortion, from the viruses. I can give them their lepto at that time as well, protect them from lepto abortion. Now in the spring, all I have to do is give them their Vibrio and maybe a lepto booster, and now I've covered the Vibrio at the right time because it's a venereal disease. So I don't want that in the fall. I want it in the spring, pre-breeding. Okay? Thank you. We made it through. Any comments, Dr. Perry? There you go. So, anybody have any questions? I did such a fantastic job, huh? Well, excuse me. I appreciate everybody coming. Thank you for being here, and I hope you got a little something out of this deal. Thank you.